Mark Flayler. I've been with Imaginet for 19 years as a trainer, consultant, and implementer for Autodesk manufacturing products primarily. I'm a platinum certified instructor, which is a pretty limited group of individuals. I'm also a certified implementer for Vault and Inventor. Pertinent experience, I've worked at many national labs over the years, as well as government institutions in implementing Autodesk manufacturing products, including Vault and Vault Professional. So I'm going to be leading you today through a quick overview of the software with some key focus on security around data management. It's not going to focus on every little feature about Vault Pro, but really more important about what it means for this sector, as well as compliance-ready features that are inside of Vault Professional about data segregation and access control. And I'll have a short demonstration with AutoCAD and Inventor for interaction with the Vault system. So a little bit of a day in the life with those key focus points. And we'll then wrap up with a short Q&A and wrap up. So let's begin by looking at an overview of Vault Professional, what it is, what the heart of this type of product is really about, right? So Vault Professional, its architecture design is a traditional server-client interaction, okay? It is a product data management system designed to house data securely and allow only certain access to users based on criteria that we're going to talk about, okay? It uses a SQL database for the metadata and pointers to the encrypted file store. So it understands how to connect these things based off of the application and the access associated to it. It does have also nimble recovery and restoration tools, such as full and incremental backups for disaster recovery, and new archive options for older data to move it to lower cost storage for quicker backups. It can also be air-gapped. So Vault can be set up in an environment where you cannot be connected to the internet, as an example. Now, if you do have a distributed organization, Vault is also available for low-speed replication setup. So you can have a main data center somewhere, and then based on your connection to other sister sites or other facilities, you can have file store replication, so files are easier accessible to those local users. But your database can always remain itself at the main data center. For extremely poor connections, you can also do full SQL publisher subscriber replication as well. But it's a very expansive architecture to be utilized in multiple scenarios. But again, it is designed as first and foremost a central project location and the ability to take ownership of data. Now, when you check out a file, it actually comes down locally to your hard drive. It doesn't stay on the network. A copy will come down locally to the machine. An archive will always stay up there though. So you're never removing fully the file from the Vault system, from the network, or from the server that it's on. But you're gonna be working on the local file yourself to use the full power of your user workstations, the full power of your graphics card, the full power of your RAM and temp file storage, things that make CAD applications run smooth and prevent crashes. It's a very common thing when you're accessing Inventor or AutoCAD files off a network that latency becomes problematic and overriding each other, and he who saves last wins scenarios prevail. With parametric software, it causes nothing but crashes because you're utilizing assemblies with parts and references which have such an interweaving of links that no two files should be accessing it or saving it at the same time, and you end up getting crashes. So this is where Vault really prevails for system integrity for the users, as well as design integrity as they're working on something so they don't lose data. There will also be visual indicators in the design software to let you know what the state of that file is. So in an example where I have an AutoCAD layout of a facility, and I have an HVAC or an electrical or a civil site plan, which are linked into it, I'll be able to visually see if I have ownership of those linked files, or if someone else is working on it, or if my copy has gone out of date, and I can refresh it then. So again, the data integrity is a huge thing here, right? So I've worked in many high security institutions where having a connection to the network and some of the stringent things that happen on the server or on the network It can cause failures, and the users end up just copying it down locally anyway because they're allowed to, and they work on it and they copy it back up when they're done. But again, that creates another he who saves last wins scenario, which is not ideal for data integrity. Okay, so what does Vault work with? What does it connect into? What can I interact with this PDM or product data management software? Well, all the Autodesk products you see there on the left-hand side. So any of the AutoCADs, Inventor, even Revit has the ability to work with Vault. Navisworks, FeatureCam, factory design utilities for layout and discrete event simulation type activities, things of that nature. Inside these products, you'll have a Vault tab in your ribbon, so you have direct interaction with the software. It also works with Office products like Word, Excel, Outlook, and PowerPoint. Well, you'll also have a tab in there to perform check-in and check-out. It will also work with some other third-party applications like MicroStation or Creo or SolidWorks. And they'll have utilities built right into their software programs to interact with Vault directly. However, it is an agnostic system too. You can put whatever file type you want inside the Vault system. You can put a PDF in there, a PLC program, a napkin paper sketch of a doghouse. Whatever you want to put into the system, you can put into the system. It's just these other tools on the screen have direct interaction inside themselves. So in an agnostic load, you would just drag and drop it in, or you'd use a check-in command from the Vault application client. Now, what benefits does having our files in this system provide other than just data integrity around check-in and check-out and ownership, which, mind you, that's a big one, right? But what else can it help me do? Well, it can help you find things. Maybe you don't know something based on the name of a file, right? Maybe you know something that's in a title block, like Acme as a company, or if something is gamma radiated, yes, or what the part number of something is, if it's different than the file name. With Vault, it can search all of this metadata. You index your AutoCAD title blocks, your Inventor drawing title blocks, and they become searchable. You can also have OCR recognizable PDFs be searchable with iFilters. And you can also assign properties to files that don't necessarily have intrinsic metadata, like an image, right? You could assign a part number to an image. You just do that on the Vault side of things as a user-defined or UDP property. Now, it goes even deeper than that. You can see in the lower right, I have this search file content selected, and I'll demonstrate that, but essentially that allows you to look inside of a file at text objects. So for instance, maybe I have an electrical diagram and I have an Allen Bradley push button, an 800H that I'm looking for. Well, I don't know the name of the file. I don't know the project. It's not in the file name either. It's not in the title block neither. So how do I find it? If you turn on search file content, it will look inside the AutoCAD file for text objects, which is pretty deep. So turning that on can give you some really, really in-depth searching capabilities. What about renaming and replacing? Okay, well, if that has an AutoCAD file with external references, which are links to files, it will repair those links when you rename something. Same thing with Inventor. If I have parts and assemblies which are linked, when I rename them in the software, it fixes those links. Now, your design teams could spend sometimes minutes to days, I wouldn't say days, minutes to hours trying to fix links that they may have had someone else break on them, right? Maybe they renamed it inside of Windows Explorer, or they did something improper with the Inventor project file. All of that goes away with Vault. So you perform your renames inside of in Vault Professional, it fixes all those links, you open the design up, you don't have these missing references all over the place. That's huge for anyone doing parametric design. For anyone using AutoCAD for linked external references, also huge. If I rename a civil drawing or my electrical layout for my facility, it knows how to fix those things. You also get the ability to do quick design iterations. So if I'm working with, again, AutoCAD or Inventor, I can take a completed design and iterate it, and it will relink all the files to the new design iteration and leave the previous one intact. Again, having to save myself a lot of time manually relinking and resaving things you'd have to do outside of the system. Something like this tower here, just if I had to reuse 80% of it, would take me probably 2 or 3 hours to properly relink all the drawings and all the parts to the new design, making sure that it's not tied back to the original. Vault would do that in less than 5 minutes. You can also roll back to previous versions or revisions, which are your milestones. Every time a check-in is performed, it keeps a rolling version of those check-ins, rolling version of those files. So if I want to go back to what a design looked like last Monday, I can jump in my DeLorean and go back in time and pull it back up and say, well, this looked a lot better back then. Let me go back to what the design was on Monday, right? Let's leapfrog that. Those are things you can do with Vault. You're not having to save off revisions and versions in different directories and have your data integrity fall apart. Now, for the licenses you would use, there's several clients you license. Anyone who's a CAD user would typically use a Vault Professional license. So if anyone uses AutoCAD, Inventor, or one of those other products I mentioned. If you have someone that does activities which are not CAD related, like maybe I need to check in Word documents or a PLC program, or maybe I need to be part of an approval process and I still need access to go into the Vault to approve something, you would use a less expensive license called Vault Office to do that, okay? There's also an entitlement called Vault Mobile that allows you to have a Android or iOS device connected to your VPN to your server that would allow you to access the Vault to perform change orders or markups and to view data, but you can't check anything out. You can't work on CAD on your tablet, of course, but it allows you to be part of that process or walk around a shop floor and investigate something without having to go back to your desk. Now, for everyone else behind your firewall, again, this is all security behind your firewall, everything we're talking about. The thin client is designed for the other consumers of data in the company. So this is a Vault Professional entitlement. It allows you to connect the Vault without the cost of a license at all for those users that simply need to view data or to download PDFs of something, right? They're not gonna be able to get the CAD file here if you don't want them to, right? This is just, again, an internal web browser. It's not exposed to the world. Now for license types, there's two different options you have. You probably know that Autodesk uses a named user or single user methodology. That uses an Autodesk cloud authentication system with secure tokens that when you hit that server, it says this license is valid for this user, and that token will be valid for typically 30 days. You can also set that up with SSO for single sign-on, using standard technologies to connect into that. This is in a world where you're allowed to connect to an authentication system, where your entire organization is not air-gapped. Now, there's also multi-user licenses, which are exclusive to government contractors. So all you have to do is have verification provided of government contracts or affiliations, and you can get a pool of network licenses that do not connect to the internet and use a FlexLM license manager. Again, completely behind your firewall, can be completely air-gapped. If you are on this call today and you wish they brought back network seats because you're a contractor, well, you can get them, right? It's just a matter of providing that verification of government contracts or affiliation. We see a lot of local, state, and city organizations using multi-user licenses because they can for that reason. If you are working with a government or a federal institution and you do contract work with them, technically you're allowed to do something like this. They just have a higher cost to them because they're a pool of licenses. So you can have 20 users that need to access it, but you can have a pool of 10 licenses, and it's first come, first served basis. Yeah. So let's talk about some compliance-ready features that exist inside of Vault Professional. We're gonna go a little bit deeper into this, right? We're gonna talk about data segregation and access control, general integration with a secure infrastructure, okay? So if you have STIGs that are basically standard security technical implementation guides, there's quite a few that exist already for Vault Professional if you are in a federal environment. If you're working as a contractor, you may not have a STIG, but essentially there's a lot of ones that have already been developed. Now you could also move to secure socket layer. We find this on almost every government installation we have Vault in. I'm not going to name a lot of them because that'd be improper to do on a public webcast, but almost everyone we work with has been setting up secure socket layer. So it changes your encryption from the server from a firewall port of 80 to 443 for secure socket layers. It requires each workstation to have a certificate that says, if I'm going to access the Vault, I need to make sure that this computer that's accessing it is a certified computer. It's been given a certificate by IT that says, yes, you can access this. And that really deters those man-in-the-middle type attacks for malware or intrusions. Data that transfers through this protocol is fully encrypted through the process. Vault also has a role-based access control system. So you can have standard and custom roles that can be created. What you're seeing there in the middle image there, the middle of the screen, is all the standard roles. But let's say you want to create a role that says, well, I have an intern, or I have a specialty contractor that we're using, but I'm going to revoke 8 or 9 different accesses from them as far as what they can or cannot do inside the system. For instance, in the commercial sector, this is very common to say if I have an intern, he can't delete anything, because if you delete something out of Vault, there's risk that it gets removed forever, right? That's changed a little bit in Vault 26 with the idea of a trash can, but essentially you can restrict deletion capabilities. For a lot of the thin client users, you might come in here and restrict the download capability of users. So they can only look through the thin client, but they can never download. These are all things you can set up based on specialized granular roles and securities. And that can be done at a folder level, at a file level, or an individual object. This is a great way to separate CUI and ITAR data. Other ways to do that would be to create separate vaults on the same server, where you have a ITAR vault that's a restricted vault and only users have access to that vault that should have access, and a non-ITAR or unrestricted vault, which allows a little bit more fair use for general design and tooling if you need to. But you can control all of this through the administrative settings. And every user that interacts with the vault will have their actions logged for accountability and traceability. It's just a matter of how you parse out the log file, which there's many ways to do that. But every action does get logged. As a simple example, I had a customer probably about 2 months ago that was setting up Power BI server to basically monitor downloads of files. And they were going through some turnover. They had an employee that was going to be terminated for one reason or another. That employee knew it was coming. So at their exit interview, they said, before you leave the company, before you walk out the door, we need you to return all the files you downloaded, because you had no business downloading this whole set of files. We know you're going to take those somewhere. So with correct logging for accountability and traceability, they're able to protect their IP from walking out the door. Now, obviously, the tighter your security is, the less likely that is to happen. But if that's something you want to have access to and trace, it's possible. Vault also controls file name enforcement, so you can prevent duplicate names from being created. And this is very compliance ready to make sure that files don't have duplicate names in your system. If an auditor comes in and says, show me the thingamajig or the widget file, and you show them 8 that show up in a search, he's going to ask which one's the right one, right? So having good file naming being enforced, or automatic file naming being enforced when you save files, can be something that really helps you towards compliance. Now, I've already spoken about this a little bit, right? But this is really one of the core features of Vault Professional, the idea of a workflow. And if someone's going to audit you based on access control, who can do what, when they can do it, when files are locked, the different states of files, if you will, and milestones and retention, this all feeds into that. So files will go through a workflow inside the system that is fully customizable, right? A sample one here is shown in the upper right, where you check a file in, it becomes work in progress. Maybe I put into a review state for someone else to look at, maybe a manager, maybe a project manager. And once they say it looks good, they release it. It becomes locked. They can't check it in or check it out. They can't delete it. It's there. It's a milestone, right? It should exist forever because we've released it to the public or to a vendor or to somebody, right? It's a controlled copy. Now, if I have to go through a class 1 change of form, fit, or function, I'd probably move back to work in progress, and that bumps my revision letter up automatically, but maintains the integrity of that previous release. If I have a class 2 change, like I forgot a dimension, maybe I go to quick change and it goes to like A.1 or A.2 or A.1.1, like a minor change, but it still gets tracked, right? I can even go to obsolete states where then maybe no one can see them anymore, but the engineers, because they only they need to care about the obsolete file. But at each one of these different stage gates that happen, you can have PDFs generated, email notifications sent to users, which need to be part of the process. You can have step files generated for protecting your intellectual property that goes to a machine perhaps, or to an outsourced vendor, instead of giving them a neutral file or native file, that is, okay? But this becomes a crucial part of any sort of compliance or workflow that you're putting in place if someone asks you how you track your data. There's also change orders, which will manage the reason for the change. So for instance, I might have a statement come in from the floor, from the fabrication floor, or from a contractor or somebody that says, we got a problem with this brake rotor on this vehicle. It's an issue. We got the wrong part, right? Someone would create that change order and then open it up for engineering review. Maybe it's a manager, maybe it's a project manager. They would then assign that to a work stage so that someone can move the file from released back to work in progress and make the responsible edits, right? Or they could have canceled it to begin with. It says, no, you got the right part, you just pulled the wrong one out of the box. Now, once the engineer is done with the work stage, they can have it checked with another reviewer. Then they can go through a review stage for approvals. It gets approved, and then you can close it out, right? Very simple flow through there. But it will keep track of who did it, when they did it, what comments they had along the process, how long it took, and it's saved inside the vault for perpetuity. So let's say 3 years go by, and I want to know why we replaced this part to begin with. I can go back into the change order and see from 3 years ago, yeah, we changed the part originally back then. I have history of that. I can always track that. Vault also has APIs that allow you to connect into other business systems if you need to for tracking or project management. You can set this up with Power BI servers. You can connect into Bluebeam or SharePoint, depending on your security levels of having data be extensible outside the system. But here's an example of a Power BI server report that feeds information in, so I can understand counts of certain things, and then examine that data and break it down into digestible dashboards. Okay. There's also property that we create, intellectual property. A lot of this is free for our customers, right? If you're getting your licenses today through Imaginet or DLT with Imaginet, then you're getting utilities for Vault Client at no charge. These basically enhance the usability of the Vault Professional Client on the end user perspective. Things like creating standardized folders or seeding your libraries with templates or standard components, sending email notifications and thin client hyperlinks to interested parties inside your firewall, as well as more advanced options for creating those synchronized PDFs or step file consumables. Now, a lot of our government clients, very high majority of them, also use our utilities for Vault Server. These provide more IT infrastructure hardening. So things like having your backup confirmation sent to make sure that they are running. More than just a server backup, a Vault backup also needs to be done. A lot of people don't know that. Data and security integrity, getting admin security reports based on who has access to certain folders, or who gave Bob admin access. That's not right. I need to revoke that. It's a good thing I ran that report and saw that someone gave Bob admin access. Let's fix it, right? Or even a digest of folder changes, like what's happened in this folder over the last week, what files have been added, what files have been deleted. Or if you have to make mass changes to your file's metadata, or mass file renames to adhere to certain naming conventions or schemes that you're asked to provide. So these are great tools that can be utilized inside of your environment. And again, these can be set up so they don't have to hit a licensing server. Yeah. Now, as far as does it meet compliance, right? These are probably a lot of questions you might have rolling around in your head. So I'm going to address ITAR, NIST, and CMMC. But essentially, for ITAR, basically, Vault helps meet it by controlling who can access what, tracking the activity, and labeling things that which are ITAR controlled, ITAR, right? Admins can ensure that only people that have the permissions to be there are given the access to be there. You can even set timeouts on accounts. So let's say that after 60 days, this user needs to get kicked out of the system, and I don't want it to just linger, right? I know that it's going to happen. Let's just set the date. And if for some reason they still need access, when they can't log in, they'll be prompted to contact IT and who the administrator is to get access again. So you can basically control not only account access, but also timeout of the accounts. So pretty nice. And then that goes again down into granularity of file and access control. So it meets all of these ITAR considerations, all these different features that are involved with ITAR. For NIST, same thing. Vault aligns with many NIST controls around access control, audit logging, configuration management, and media protection. A lot of people start asking me when I start talking about NIST, what about FedRAMP moderate? Do I have to worry about that? Absolutely not, because FedRAMP moderate's more cloud-based technology. Nothing here is cloud-based. It's all behind your firewall, right? It's data integrity behind your VPN, behind your firewall, okay? So FedRAMP is not something you need to be concerned about with Vault. There are some components that could connect to the internet, but they don't have to. And lastly, for CMMC, levels 1 through 3, Vault supports practices for access control, audit and accountability, and configuration management, incident response, communications, and any sort of relevant level 2 and some level 3 capabilities. So it meets quite a few of these. Again, secure, encrypted, behind your firewall, server-client interactions. Okay. So we're going to do a very short demonstration here, just to kind of showcase what Vault operates as inside this environment. And I'm going to start with AutoCAD. So here inside of AutoCAD, I have this office layout, right? It's called Office Plan A. I have my external references palette open over here on the left-hand side, and I have a Vault tab up here as well. I can see this file, based on the status of this, is currently work in progress, revision A, in an engineering category. Well, I'd like to start making changes to it. So I'm going to right click on it and say check out. And I'm going to overwrite the local data. Here we go. Let's go ahead and save it real quick. There we go. Okay. So what I'm going to do is take this desk that's down here. This is Milton's desk. And Milton is problematic in the office. Milton needs to be moved to the back room here. Okay. With all the other office supplies. Just going to do a quick stretch. There we go. Give Milton a little bit more room. Okay, so a small change has been performed there, right? Now, here on my external references palette, it shows that there's an asterisk here. That means it needs to save. I'll go ahead and save that. The green that'll appear here in the bubble lets me know my local copy is newer than what's on the server. So I'm ready to check this in. That's all I needed to do. I'm gonna right click and say check in. And this is gonna go into my Vault into a specified folder structure. And this folder structure is something that's only available to, maybe facility or office employees, right? I'm gonna say here I moved Milton to the back room. If you guys are getting that reference, you can all be my friend. I'll say that. So in goes the file. And it's creating a visualization as well. So I can view this inside the system. That's another great thing about Vault is I can view the file in the Vault as a user without having to check it out or download the file itself. Okay. Now let's take a look at how that looks with Inventor. Okay, we're just kind of doing check-ins right now, right? So everything we're doing from the application. So here I have this this gearbox, and I want to check in the parts and all the assemblies for it. Now here you see a different icon. This icon tells me that this never existed in the Vault before. That's what this little plus is for. So I'm going to choose check-in. And down here, I'm going to say this is the initial check-in. It's going to go into a folder called Designs Gearbox, which is basically the same folder it is here locally on my hard drive. And I can also tell it to check in all the drawings associated to it. This just happens to be an assembly with just parts though. I'm going to go ahead and check that in and say okay. And it's going to check in about 33 files. Okay. This will take just a little bit longer because I also have to create visualizations for it. But while that's running, we're going to go over to the Vault system, which is my Vault client. Every user that has Vault installed, whether it's Office or Professional, would have this application client on their machine too. So here's designs. I'm going to look at the AutoCAD files first. You can see I have some files checked out. Actually this tells you where a file is, right? This AEC facilities file, which is a different file than I was working on, is checked out to this machine, to this local desktop by this user. So it gives me all that information if I need to find it. Now, if I go down here to, I believe it was Office Plan, I believe. Let's look at history there. Yep, there it is. So here I moved Milton to the back room, right? I can see the initial check-in. That was done May 1st of 2024. Today's check-in was done on 6/25/2025, and I have my comment there. Now, on these files, on the right-hand side, I have all the properties that tell me when it was created, who created it, and all the information associated to it. I even have user-defined properties, which would pull from the title blocks of the drawings. This one didn't have any of that mapping, but it would show in here like, let's say, manager and approved by, or part number, project, maybe title, right, that applies to this office. Now, if I click up here on View, I can, again, view the file right inside of here. And I can see Milton's desk is in the back room, okay? Likewise, if I go to the first one and click View on that office plan, actually I need to, that wasn't a milestone. So I'm only looking at the current milestone of A. But I can also right-click and open that one directly or go back in time to what that was before I moved Milton's desk, okay? Now what about files that have links or references? So up here is a reference to the factory site. Here I have 9 versions and 2 revisions, 2 major milestones. Here on uses, I can see the factory site has these external references tied to it. Likewise, if I look at the floor plan on where used, I can see it's consumed into the factory site. So you get breadcrumb trails in either direction. You're not worried about changing a file and not knowing the scope of that change, right? So this really increases your ability to track your links and your connections to other files to keep your data integrity intact. Now, let's go and look at another folder. Let's go ahead and refresh this. And I think I put that under designs. Let's see if that's done checking in. Yeah, it is. Designs Gearbox. Yep, okay. Right there. So here's the gearbox checked in. You can see it created all the files in here as well. If I look at the gearbox IAM, I can see it has no where used, but its uses are everything that goes into it. This is actually a way you can build a bill of material inside the system as well, in case you need to connect this to like an ERP system or another system where you're tracking bills of material and such. Okay. Here on the View tab, again, I can look at this without ever downloading the file. So maybe you want to prevent people from getting access to the file itself. I had some things turned off there on that visualization, but you can do things like exploding the model to blow it out more, things like that. Yeah. Now this is all currently work in progress. So this is a editable file. Someone could check this in and check it out multiple times, right? If I'm ready to release this though, I don't want anyone checking it out anymore. I want to release it somewhere, or I want to really lock it down. I can just choose the top level assembly, like the gearbox here, and change the state. So let's do that from a right-click menu. And we'll go to a release state. Now, mind you, you can have different workflows here. This is a flexible release process I'm currently using. You could have an ITAR release process. You could have a CUI release process. You could have a unrestricted release access if you have certain parts and designs that certain people shouldn't see. That's another way to control it. I'll go ahead and release those. And what you'll see is this will change from state work in progress to released at revision A. Now, I had an update, right? Someone told me that this the shaft on here needs to be longer, or I got the wrong bolts in there, or the wrong spur gear, something, right? If I change the state on it again, back to work in progress, I don't have to do it for everything, right? It's just automatically doing that because that's what I selected for children, okay? But if I just cancel that quick and show this slightly different, let's just say not to include the dependents. So I'm just going to change the assembly, and then maybe I want to also change two other components to work in progress. That will just make those revision B and not the entire design. So you can throttle your change on your scope of change, so you're not affecting things that have no business changing. Okay. All right, now let's take a look at some security things. So let me just log out of this real quick. And when I log back in, you can see I have a couple different options for authentication. If I'm using Autodesk ID, that is using my SSO and multi-factor authentication with, let's say, Okta or Ping Federate, right? Something you might use for cloud authentication and multi-factor. That would be that particular one. That was just my inventor. You could use Windows accounts, which are basically tied to your Active Directory, if you want to use that instead. Or you can use a Vault account, which is not advised at all, because this is just a general name of some kind, right? This could be, M Flailer, and my password is 12345. That's terrible, right? I can have that written on the bottom of my keyboard, right? That's terrible. No one wants that. So instead, I'm going to have my Active Directory account, or maybe my Autodesk ID, okay? Now, for me, I'm actually going to use a Vault account because I'm normally logging in as administrator. This is something that, again, you can control. Make sure only certain people have this, right? Here we go. I should also mention, by having our Imaginet server utilities, we hide the administrative account when you do backups. So that's beneficial, because otherwise your admin password is actually written in your script, and that can be against a lot of compliancy things. So there's definitely tools that we provide our government clients or are available to purchase to increase your security. Okay. So let's take a look at some searching now. Let's go to this AutoCAD electrical folder. Okay, so here in module 14, I'm looking for the file that has that Allen Bradley push button in it I talked about earlier. If I go up here and I do a search of just the files by themselves, right, and I type in 800H, I get nothing. I get nothing returned to me. If I turn on search file content, that goes deeper and looks inside the file. And it said it found 800H as a text object in these 4 files. So that allows me to do a little bit more investigation now. So if I go to read tag number 4 here, and I look at this PLC drawing, let me go ahead and just update the visualization quick. This is something you normally have done as a job spooler on your server to make sure they keep updating. I just have to manually do this one. But we'll let that one refresh, and we'll take a look at the schematic. Now, obviously, if it's an attribute of a block, I'm gonna have to open the file up. I'm gonna have to really dig in. But if it's on a leader of a text object, I'd be able to find it. Okay, so I can come in here and start looking around. Okay, I'm not gonna find 800H on it because it's actually in a block of one of my push buttons. So it's an attribute of I think PB213A, right? But at least it knew that it was inside this file somewhere, even though it may not be visually shown. Okay. So next up, we'll talk about change orders. Okay, currently I don't have any change orders created. This is a pretty fresh, clean vault, but I want to create a change order that starts tracking why we're doing something. So back over on that gearbox, I'm going to say the gearbox has an issue with the front cover. So I'm going to do a control select of those. and say add to a new change order. Here I can have my change order number, title, description, and a recommended due date. I can even change different routings. So maybe the routing goes from not the default, but maybe it needs to go to the mechanical group or the electrical group. Like who's really responsible for the approvals and work that happens on this design, right? You can have different routings for different types of personas, different types of change orders, if you will. But it automatically adds those records to it, and I can add comments all the while along there. When I look at the files, I can actually visualize them here. And again, I might have to run an update on this because it's a new version, but I can also do red lines on that markup. So I can always kind of see, you know, why we're doing the change. You know, who's telling me what we're doing, right? It's not just a paper drawing that someone printed off and then bled all over and then handed me on my desk, right? I'm actually capturing that in the system for what the markup is, okay? And then we have our status here. Now this one doesn't have the additional check state. I just go right from work to approval to the review stage. That's the only adjustment you can make here, okay? But that's good enough for everyone we've worked with so far. So you can also have a data sheet that controls information. And at the end, you can also do a change order summary that says, at the completion of closeout of this change order, here's a summary of everything we did, who did it, when they did it, and all the comments. Maybe you PDF that and put it into another system, or you put it into the Vault just so someone can see that cleanly. Okay. So that's a short demonstration of the Vault system inside of not only AutoCAD, also Inventor, how you would change states. Probably one last thing to talk about is how you adjust security on a given folder or file, right? So let's take a look at our administrative settings. Let's go to our global settings here. As an administrator, as someone who has that power, right? I'm Chuck Norris in the system today. I can go up here to manage access, and I can add groups, add users, link in Active Directory groups, things of that nature. I can restrict their roles and permissions through this environment as well with this roles and permissions, where I can then assign, adjust, or create my own roles and permissions for the users. Okay, that's where everything starts. Everything starts with who the person is and what role and permission they generally have. Beyond that, we start going into the granularity of security. So for instance, if I start looking at just a folder level, right, for Gearbox, if I go here and right click and go to details, I can set security for this, right? Let's go ahead and add security that says that the guest accounts or maybe my shop users or something like that is going to be a member for this effective access. And I'm going to deny the download to that guest access. I'm going to allow them to read it, or I can deny them from reading it as well, right? Some things kind of overlap here, right? If they can't read it, then they're not going to be able to download it because they can't see it anyway, right? So there's things you can control here to make sure that people have the access they need and are restricted from the access they don't need, okay? Now,